Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the show. You guys know I bring best of guests in my show, and today's guest is Rowan Vail. Rowan, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
All right, Rowan, I would like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Yeah, my name is Rowan Vail. I'm author of uh, the memoir Enough. Um, at the face value, it's a story of addiction and the grueling daily grind of recovery. But really, what it comes down to is it's a loss of identity. I used to give pieces of myself away, and going through life, I carried that with me, and I continued until one day I didn't recognize the person in the mirror. Um, I'm I'm currently 7 months into recovery. I'm 7 months sober, and you know, I wrote my story to help those out there still struggling, not just with addiction, but just in life in general. Of dealing with identity crisis or a sense of loss and trying to find their way.
All right, thank you so much, Rowan. So let's get into the questions I have here for you. What does the title "Enough" mean to you, and why that word?
Well, when I was a kid, it was tough. I always had this feeling that I wasn't enough for anybody, and I always had a sense of like longing or trying to find love because I never felt good enough. But early in the story, that it starts with my breaking point. That scream, I've had enough, and I can't do this anymore. Um, you know, as it takes you through the journey, it I strip away all the layers of all the false identities and the mask that I've created and learn to become enough for myself and to be enough, to be comfortable in my own skin, to be true to my authentic self, and that's enough. So
Okay, so
it had to be both meanings, it's both ends of the spectrum, and then it takes you through the full arc.
I thank you so much, Patrick. So, my next question for you is: you write about giving yourself away. What does that actually look like in your life?
Well, so I grew up in a family that was, it was split up. I dealt with alcohol in my family, and we had a family business. So, like I never had a sense of feeling like I was loved. The only time I really got attention was when I got abused or any, and everybody was too busy working. So I learned how to make myself useful. I learned how to fit into other people's lives. I used to change who I was to fit into people's lives, and if I wasn't, I made myself smaller so I wasn't seen. So me as a little boy, I didn't know it at the time. I just learned how to be useful and to make people happy and without any regard for myself. And I carried that with me into relationships as I grew older. And I became codependent on relationships and eventually the choices that I made to fit into people's lives and just to be seen and have a sense of belonging and find love. It was, you know, it, I had a lot of guilt and shame from the choices that I made, and it led into addiction. Addiction was the symptom. It was to cover up the noise in my head from all the guilt and the shame. And when one substance stopped working, I'd go to something stronger, and then the spiral just kept going. The noise got louder. I used more, and eventually it came to a point where I literally physically could not recognize the person I was looking at, and it was physically and internally. And then I that's when I decided it was time to finally ask for help and get into my recovery. And when it came to recovery, it wasn't just about getting sober. It was about finding what was going on underneath all of that. And so when I literally did anything to fit in, to try to be seen, to try to find love. Like I gave pieces of my soul away just to try to find out. I looked in all sorts of directions, every direction externally except the one that really mattered, and that was inward.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron. So, you described not recognizing your own face. Can you take us to that moment?
Well, I was in the the prime of my addiction. I was at a point where I was staying in a trap house, and I caught my reflection in the mirror, and I didn't recognize who I was looking at. My My eyes were sunken in. I was emaciated. My skin was gray. My eyes were dark, and it looked like the person I was looking at was dead. I didn't know who I was looking at. I didn't know. I had to sit with it and stare and wonder, how my life got like this. And it took me through a lot of memories and a lot of guilt, and that I at that point, I thought it was easier for me just to disappear, with all the shame and the guilt I had. I tried to erase myself, because I thought I was completely gone. I was past the point of no return, like there was no saving me. That's what I thought, anyways. But, it was internally, I thought I was, by giving so much of myself away, eventually my external turned into my internal, you know what I mean? Like my my internal self, like I didn't know who that was. I never knew who that was. I used to I used to change who I was to fit into other people's lives, and I never returned back to who I originally was. I just kept changing and adding all these masks and having these identities. I became a friend for one person, and then I changed, and I wanted to become friends with this group of people, and then I wanted to be with this woman, and I wanted to be a father and have a family, and then I was a fighter, and I was a lot of different things, but one thing I really wasn't was myself.
All right. So, what's the lie that keeps people stuck? They believe that they are too far gone.
That is the lie. The you're too far gone. You're past the point of no return. That's the disease doing its own marketing. It's not a fact. It's a feeling. The addiction tells you that, so you stop looking for a way out, and it's that voice in the back of your head saying, "Oh, you don't need that. You're so messed up. That's the guilt. That's the shame. It's paralyzing. And when you have those feelings, it makes you not want to try anything, and it keeps you stuck. I believed it completely when I was as far down as a person can go, and I was past saving. That's the gap between how gone I felt and how findable I actually was. And that's the reason I wrote it. I think people really need to know that that's a lie, and that they're closer than they know. There is a way out, and it's by if they can relate in some way to my story, they can see, hey, that he made it out. That's why I wrote it, to help others, to let them know that there is a way out.
All right. So, what finally started to turn things around for you?
Um, well, it started by me getting honest with myself. I had to admit that my life was unmanageable and that I couldn't do it anymore. So, by taking that first honest step, and then I had to surrender control. I had to, most of my life, because people weren't there for me, I had to do things on my own. And, no matter how much of a struggle it was, I worked my butt off, and all I ever did was survived. And it was a struggle. And until I let go of the reins, I had to give God, control of it. And when I let go of control, that's when things started to work out. And you know, not every day's good. There's some bad days, but there's lessons to be learned with some of those bad days, and pretty much everything we go through is a lesson. And I learned that when I let go of control, things work out a lot more than when I tried to control things. And it's by staying consistent, being honest with myself, and doing the next right thing every day. Taking this one day at a time. And early in recovery, it wasn't even one day at a time. It was 1 hour at a time and 1 minute at a time. And I built up trust within myself and with my faith in God, and everything's just. I know that as long as I keep doing the next right thing and work the program and stay sober and help people and be of service, that God's gonna take care of me.
All right. So, what's the difference between performing a life and actually living one?
Well, wearing a mask and trying to fit into people's lives and changing who I was just to be seen, to be heard, to fit in, to find love, like that's all the performance, and up until I really did some deep soul searching, trying to find out who I was underneath all of it. I wasn't able to discern the truth from the false, and it took me the daily work to peel away all the masks that I created and all the different identities, and underneath it all was the true, authentic me. Uh, and I used to be to when I started to be of service. I started to help other people because by being of service to others, I was able to love others, and by loving others, I could love myself. And that was still a performance because it was about, oh, look at me, look who I'm helping. I'm working the program. I'm doing things out of myself. And then it started to slow down after a little while. And when I started to slow down and actually sit in prayer and meditation and sit with my thoughts, I started to become aware of my emotions and my feelings and the patterns that I've been living. And when I started becoming aware of those, I could change the patterns by choosing differently. And I started becoming present with myself, and I've been able to, understand and change those patterns. And then at the same time, I've been able to enjoy the little things. Pain and suffering strips away the ego and the false persona, and then when it comes down to it, I can feel joy because like one thing I took for granted is joy and happiness, but I never really understood it until I went through, pain and suffering, because I wouldn't be able to actually embody it without, going through the hard stuff. If I didn't go through the hard stuff, I wouldn't be able to just like take it for what it is, and I'm able to enjoy the little things like watching birds fly by and just enjoy a sunrise and just be at peace.
Okay, so you are a father. How does that drive the work you are doing now?
Well, considering that I haven't seen my children in 7 years, but I was in a really bad time in my life where I wasn't able to be the father that they needed. And because of the conditioning and the way that my family was, that I thought I was just like my family. So I thought it was the best option for my children was for me to leave and that they could have a better life without me. Um, now I'm sure after a long time that I won't get back. I carried a lot of shame and guilt with that every day with me for a long time, which drove my addiction. But now, you know, I heard I heard my youngest daughter's voice for the first time after 6 years, and it's what started the the recovery stuff. It brought me back to what was real, and that I wanted to go home to my children, and that in order for me to do that, I needed to get better. And I'm becoming the man that I needed to be for myself and also for them. Um, uh, it's all in God's timing. When and if He brings them back into my life, I'm becoming the man that they deserve as a father and that they can be proud of. And that's what drives me every day.
Okay, so what would you say to someone listening right now who feels like they are past saving?
That you are not too far gone, that you are seen. I know what it feels like to feel, like you're past the point of no return. And I used to think that I was so completely lost that I couldn't be found, but there's a way out, and I've walked it, and that you are loved, and the help is there, and you are seen.
Okay, so what does the path inward is the way home mean? And how does someone start working it?
Path inward is, I used to look in every direction except the one that I didn't want to look, and that was self. The things I didn't look at because of the choices I made, because I was terrified that if somebody seen that they wouldn't accept me for who I was. Truth is, I didn't even know who I was. So I had to start taking those masks off and start looking in and trying to find what made me tick, why I acted the way I acted and did the things I did. And I needed to change those patterns. And it started with getting honest with myself. And by being honest every day and doing, the next right thing instead of lying and cheating and stealing and, the things we do out of shame and guilt. You know, when I got honest and I shared it with people, I share my story, it helps me heal. And I did it in a safe place where people understood, where I wasn't alone anymore. And the looking inward, it felt, changing those patterns, and by changing those patterns and peeling away the layers of the onion, you know, I get down to the center of it, and that center of it, it's that little boy that's always been there that I forgot was there, and that is the way home for myself.
So here is my final question for you. If there's one thing you wish listeners would take away from this conversation, what would you want that to be?
No matter what you're going through, and not necessarily addiction, but loneliness, trying to find love, just a sense of belonging, that you're not alone. We all have different vices and it leads to different paths, but eventually it turns into, we all have this universal need for love. And I used to think that I was uniquely different from everybody else. If you understood my story, then you would know that I was different. But the truth is that I'm not. I'm no different than anybody else. And then, it's the doubt that wanting to be unique. We're all special in our own way, but we're all very similar in a very, similar way. If that says anything, and there is a way out, and it's through love, and you are seen. You are not too far gone.
All right, thank you, Ron, for coming to my show. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your insight with me and my audience. So, how can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
You can find me on Facebook on the page Rowan Vail, not the person, the page. And then I also post I post some daily experience, strength, and hope, and the podcast that I'm on. I'll upload all the video or all the audios and the videos from the podcast. And then also, I just made a TikTok page. There's a couple videos up, and there's an Instagram page for Rowan Vail. And then also, my book is available on Amazon titled Enough. And also, if you support local bookstores, it is also on bookshop.org.
All right, thank you so much once again, Ron. Really appreciate you for coming to my show.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
All right, have a wonderful day.